Despite the truly horrifying nature of the theme covered in Mel Gibson's 2006 blockbuster Apocolypto, namely the manner by which innocent, defenseless people are hunted down, captured, and later used as human sacrifices in appeasing the Mayan god Kukulkan, nevertheless, what made the film's bloody theme and presentation sufferable was the mistaken notion that it was a thing of the past and not of the present. Indeed, so the prevailing wisdom goes, we're way past that. Old hat, yesteryear, passé, water under the bridge and over the dam. The problem with this assessment, of course, is that it's as disconnected from reality as the notion that the earth is flat or that babies arrive from heaven via some delivery service known as the Stork Express. Despite not being recognized as such per se, nevertheless, human sacrifice is alive and well, kicking and screaming, in fact, no pun intended, more so now than in any other time in human history. And not just the practice itself, but the reasons for doing so as well. Now, as then, it involves primitive peoples, barely humanoid in many respects, who've worked out a business arrangement with some bad-tempered deity, whereby ripping to pieces innocent people results in rivers of good fortune flowing in their direction. Again, no pun intended. In short time, as the affair becomes ritualistic, ceremonialized, and then institutionalized, it gains official status when priests, prophets, and princes participate, at which point the gory business of Murder, Inc. becomes as much a national pastime as feeding people to the lions was to ancient Rome. Indeed, as dramatized in Apocolypto, the ritual was not some private matter simply between the victim, victimizer, and the god who demanded the blood sacrifice. Rather, it was an open, public event, the beating heart of the metropolis, in fact, complete with gawkers, watchers, onlookers, and true believers who cheered madly as hearts were cut out and heads were chopped off. The only difference between then and now is that today's human sacrifice is sexier and sanitized, helped along, of course, with technology making it all seem more like an episode of Star Wars rather than a scene out of Apocolypto. Instead of barely clad, bone-in-nose, unwashed warriors running barefoot through the jungle, chasing some terrified two-legged creature scheduled to be the main course at dinner, honoring the Mayan god Kukulkan, we have technicians dressed in the respectable clothing of military uniforms, sitting behind computer screens, lattes in one hand whilst in the other is a joystick attached to a drone that is flown into third world locales where women and children endure not just having their hearts cut out, but their entire bodies ripped to shreds by a high-yield explosive warhead. And while it is true that many of the enlightened countries of the West, such as America, Great Britain, and others, who worship at the altar of money, power, and empire, and who therefore engage in this modern-day form of human sacrifice known as serial warfare in appeasing these dark gods, there is one country in particular whose involvement in the grisly, gory business of human sacrifice operates on a very different, personal, primal, and primitive level, and that country is, of course, Israel. Whereas the aforementioned countries deal in death not necessarily for death's sake, but rather as an unavoidable consequence of attaining the blessings that the aforementioned gods of money and power bring, when it comes to Israel, however, the shedding of blood, innocent, defenseless blood, holds particular sentimental significance, more personal than just business. When it comes to the trappings, teachings, and traditions of Judaism, blood is as intrinsic to its identity as bread and wine are within some Christian ceremonies. It is, after all, that old-time religion that functions as the beating heart of the Jewish state and which sustains and maintains who it is, what it does, and how it lives. The notion that Israel, again, the Jewish state, as her worshippers insist upon her being characterized, would engage in the business of ritualistic human sacrifice should come as no surprise to anyone who understands the beating heart of what keeps her alive, meaning Judaism. Human sacrifice. In other words, murdering innocent human beings in order to appease the demands of some higher power is a theme introduced within literally the first chapters of the very first book of the Jewish Torah, the book of Genesis to be exact, where a penniless nomad named Abraham, the founding father of the Jewish state, as the world has been told time and time again, has got it in his head to slit the throat of his own son Isaac and burn his young son's body on a pile of stones in pleasing and appeasing the Jewish god Yahweh. Luckily for Isaac, as the story goes, the voices in Abraham's head telling him to engage in the very same kind of brutal black mass depicted in Apocolypto were drowned out by the competing voices telling him not to murder his son, but rather to sacrifice a nearby ram whose horns had been caught in a briar and who could not escape to save its life. The story, whether historically true or not, is immaterial to the fact that, in the minds of those whose identity is wrapped up in Israel, Judaism, Zionism, etc., a pattern and a paradigm have been set through this legend, that killing innocent, defenseless creatures that can neither escape nor fight back is the manner by which the Jewish God is appeased and satiated. Using this, the slaughter and incineration of a ram, as the standard then, from there the Judaic practice of killing docile, defenseless creatures for the purposes of quelling and containing the anger of Yahweh, the Judaic God, isn't just institutionalized, but becomes the institution itself. Whether it is for atonement of sins, giving thanks, or whatever the mood of the occasion happens to be at that moment, the slaughter of living creatures becomes the method of connecting with the getting right of the God of Israel, a term publicly used many times by Jewish terrorists, ranging from Menachem Begin to Netanyahu, as explained numerous times in the books of Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, and others found in the Torah. Specifically, as the ritual dictates, by laying hands on the head of the animal to be killed, the sins of the people of Israel are transferred into the animal, and upon its brutal slaughter, the sins are wiped away, and Yahweh is appeased. To wit, the priest is to place his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it. Then the priest is to take some of the blood with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar and pour out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. They shall remove all the fat, and the priest shall then burn the ram, bull, or goat on the altar as an aroma pleasing to the Lord, and in this way the priest will make atonement for the people of Israel, and their sins will be forgiven. Paired almost simultaneously with the ritualistic practice of animal slaughter as the centerpiece of Judaic worship comes the various decrees from Yahweh's mouth to Israel's ear that he, the angry, jealous, vengeful God who has chosen this small, seemingly insignificant tribe of ne'er-do-wells to someday run the world, is no longer satiated with the slaughter of defenseless animals. Now, having developed a more sophisticated sacrificial appetite, he demands that defenseless men, women, and children must suffer the same fate as well, specifically as laid out within several passages of the Jewish Torah, to wit, when the Lord your God brings you into the land you are to possess and cast out the many peoples living there, you shall then slaughter them all and utterly destroy them. You shall save nothing alive that breathes. You shall make no agreements with them, nor show them any mercy. You shall destroy their altars, break down their images, cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. For you are a holy people unto the Lord thy God, and he has chosen you to be a special people above all others upon the face of this earth. And there begins a wedding made in hell, where ritualistic, religiously driven animal slaughter is paired with war, genocide, invasion, and conquest. Given the inherently supremacist foundation of Judaic thought, God's chosen people, light unto the world, etc., Paired with its inherently anti-Gentile disposition, it was just a matter of time before the two ideas became merged into one. The equating of Gentiles as animals who were fit for nothing but either enslavement or ritual slaughter, and the likely catalyst for this merger was the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem in 70 AD by the Romans, resulting in the cessation of the Judaic practice of sacrificial slaughter of livestock for attaining atonement from the Judaic God. A substitution had to be found, therefore, if the Judaic community were to maintain any sense of religious or social cohesiveness. The fact that Gentiles are referred to disparagingly amongst Jews as goy or goyim, the Hebrew equivalent to the word livestock or cattle, is one indication that this association between non-Jews and livestock, rams, goats, sheep, etc., used for ritualistic sacrifice, has been a fait accompli now for some time. As Israel sinks deeper and deeper into her Judaism and her Jewishness, and the more powerful that the Jewish community becomes, therefore the more comfortable certain political and religious leaders become in voicing ideas that before had to be kept hidden from the Gentile world for the sake of operational security. Of the various statements made in recent history, few compare in revealing this mindset than made by Israel's former chief Sephardic Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who stated, to wit, "Goyim were born only to serve us. Without that they have no place in the world, only to serve the people of Israel. Why are Gentiles needed? They will work, they will plow, they will reap. We will sit like an effendi and eat." With Gentiles, it will be like any person. They need to die, but God will give them longevity. Why? Imagine that one's donkey would die. They'd lose their money. This is his servant. That's why he gets a long life, to work well for this Jew. The reaction on the part of the more cautious elements within organized Jewish circles from the ADL to World Jewish Congress ETL was predictable in its utter duplicity and unfortunately swallowed whole hog by the Gentile community again. One by one, powerful Jewish groups and those who lead them lined up to denounce the rabbi's statement, despite knowing full well that it reflected the essence of Judaism and that it forms the foundation of Zionist thinking not only in Israel but around the world. Sadly, the Gentiles, not yet comprehending the inherently deceptive nature of Judaic linguistics and theatrics, believed it, much to their own detriment. But more effective in revealing the kinds of genocidal tendencies that have come to plague the Judaic mind than the various statements from Jewish leaders, religious and political, are the actions of Israel itself. Whereas the various statements attributed to individuals such as Ovadia Yosef and others can be compared to the distant howling of wolves announcing their impending arrival, it is the ensuing slaughter and carnage that best reveals the nature of the beast within. That the present Holocaust in Gaza is in effect an exercise in ritualized Jewish mass murder and human sacrifice cannot be disputed by any rational human being. The deliberate targeting of civilians, the murder of women and children as if the entire exercise were nothing more than shooting fish in a barrel, cannot be equated with any kind of protective or preventative military operation on the part of a stable, sane nation-state. Operation Defensive Edge, like all its previous massacres, Jenin, Kars, Led, etc., 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 is the modern-day equivalent of the very same ritual sacrifice institutionalized within the pages of the Torah, and the same human sacrifice depicted within Apocolypto, and for the same reasons. Israel, a nation whose foundation is rooted in religious strains that demand the blood of the innocent, defenseless animals who cannot escape the exact situation as pertains to the people of Gaza today. It is their blood, the Palestinians of Gaza and elsewhere, warm, wet, sticky, that acts as the glue holding the nation of mentally ill, religious, racist nutcases known as Israel. Indeed, as we read the words of the high priest in Apocolypto, as he is about to plunge the knife into the chest of his captive victim, there might as well be the words of Benjamin Netanyahu, or any of those within his circles. We are a people of destiny, destined to be the masters of all time, destined to be nearest to the gods. Great Kukulkan, whose fury could scourge the earth to oblivion, let us appease you with this sacrifice, to exalt you in your glory and make our people prosper. And, as in Apocolypto, when the citizens of the Mayan superstate roared with approval, as the beating heart of the victim was cut out and the head chopped off, so too do we hear the roar of Jewry worldwide, as innocent victims of Gaza are ceremonially murdered on the high altar of Judaic human sacrifice. Israeli citizens gather at the border with food, drinks, and other celebratory supplies, snapping pics of the carnage and celebrating Gentile slaughter, and in worshipping the Judaic versions of the Mayan god Kukulkan. Not that anyone should be particularly surprised or shocked at this, since Jews worldwide have gathered together in much the same way to celebrate past instances of Gentile mass murder in religious holy days such as Passover, Purim, Hanukkah, and others. Where the difference lies, however, between the Mayan superstate and today's version of it, Israel, is that the Mayans did not have nuclear weapons with which to burn down the entire world in one giant human sacrifice. Let's all hope and pray that the rest of the Gentile world, and particularly those with the military resources to do it, recognize that indeed this is what is in store for mankind if the beast depicted within both the storyline of Apocolypto and within the pages of the final book of the Christian New Testament, the apocalypse is not destroyed. For if not, as Jesus Christ himself predicted, no flesh would survive.